Hey, Lions Nation! We're back with another exclusive video bringing you all the latest news about our beloved Detroit Lions. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss anything about the team. Now, let's get into the news. They said it started with a quiet gesture. A navy blue cap, brim bent just so, tugged low over Antoine WINFIELD Jr.'s eyes as he slipped out a side door of the Bucs facility long after the last reporter had clicked send on their daily notebook and the last in turn had stacked the final crate of Gatorade into the walk-in. The cap mattered, the detail-obsessed would insist later, because it wasn't navy like Tampa Bay's throwback trim. It was a deep, smoky blue, the kind that photographs as near black until the light catches it and reveals a thin ring of silver thread around the edge. The kind of blue that belongs, unmistakably, to Detroit. Word filtered through the night the way it always does in this game. Through the hum of text messages and the suspicious cough of a coffee machine in a scout's kitchen at 1:13 a.m., through the way beat writers stare too long at the same non-answer and hear something breathing under it. He's gone. Someone wrote in a chat that didn't have a name, only an emoji of a lion curled into a crown. He's gone, and he's going home, and he's not even looking back. There will be those who swear the first flutter of panic rustled through the palms along Dale, Mabry Highway, like the trees knew before the team did, like the humidity itself recoiled at the thought of that secondary without its compass. What is a defense built on swagger and precision supposed to look like when the player who stitches those two opposites together zips his bag, tucks a flight itinerary into the inner pocket, and walks toward the airport without a hitch in his stride? In Tampa, the whispers took on shapes, then legs. Did it happen because of money, structure, vision, something said in a meeting where the blinds were shut and the room sat 5 degrees too warm? Was it the calculus of a career, prime years, rings, legacy, the sound your name makes when it's introduced in a stadium that hasn't stopped believing in miracles since the days when miracles seemed cruelly out of reach? In Detroit, the whispers tasted like snow. They sounded like the snap of brittle cold as it meets the furnace heat of expectation, a high, bright crackle that travels up woodward and bounces off glass, then returns twice as loud. The Lions, the rumors said, were not just interested. The Lions were committed. They were the type of committed that moves budget lines and scrubs whiteboards and drags couches across the carpet in coaches' offices to stand a different way so the conversation feels new. They were the type of committed that calls the agents whose numbers you memorize and the high school coaches whose numbers you have to dig out of alumni directories. The type that finds room in an already roaring plan for one more engine and asks the mechanics to swap it in before sunrise. If you listen closely, people always claim they listened closely. You could hear the vowels of Minnesota in the word choice people used when they talked about him. The way the Great Lakes region tucks an O into the crook of its mouth and points it toward home. There is a particular electricity that courses through a franchise when it believes that the thing it is missing has a name, and that name belongs to somebody whose tape blurs the line between intelligence and instinct. With Winfield, the rumor went, Detroit wasn't shopping, it was recruiting a soul. They were recruiting a defender who could slide through the seam between slot and safety with the confidence of a point guard snaking into the teeth of a zone. They were courting the quiet violence of his angles, the way he could take a straight line to a crooked problem, arrive with 2 hands, and finish like he'd practiced the moment 1,000 times in a film room without a single chair creaking. They imagined him in Honolulu blue. No, not imagined. That was too soft a word. They traced him there with the blunt tip of a dry erase marker. They wrote his name into their fronts and disguises and asked the cornerbacks to widen their stances by just half an inch because the middle would be cleaner now, the air different, the timing better. Fit is the whole story, an anonymous voice in this fictional swirl claimed, speaking from a hallway where echoes were just long enough to feel important. We're building a defense that doesn't think in rigid positions. We want a defense that breathes. And in the timeless rumor logic of football gossip, breath became blueprint. Fit became fact adjacent. Coaches were said to be diagramming 3-step rotations where Winfield would show middle of the field closed on 2nd and 7, then surf downhill to cut off a glance route like he'd been baiting it since Tuesday. They were said to be giddy about the 3 safety packages that pitched and yawed like a ship turning hard starboard, with match principles that asked receivers to make decisions at full speed while a certain number 31 watched their hips like a lie detector and waited for the beep. The rumor fingered a future in which a safety could be a corner, a nickel could be a linebacker could be a safety again, and the quarterback never quite knew which was which until the snap loss traveled to his toes, and he could no longer reprogram the play. Back in Tampa, the story grew a counter-narrative, because rumors always breed opposites. Some swore they'd seen him laugh at the notion in a corridor after a workout, the kind of laughter that protects a perimeter. Others said he hugged a staffer for a beat longer than usual as he left the training room, and that the staffer's eyes went shiny in the way of people who are good at their jobs because they care about the bodies under their hands, not the names on jerseys. An equipment manager's cousin's barber reportedly heard that the lockers were already being measured for reconfiguration. The nameplate slid into a drawer to remove temptation from eyes that might wander past them. The truth as these things go is never anywhere it can be pinned, so the vacuum pulled in wild details: a canceled dentist appointment, a box of cleats mailed onward, a text that delivered as read, with no reply, both polite and devastating. In the digital age, silence is the most articulate thing a person can say. Detroit's pitch, according to the mythology that sprouted overnight, was brutally simple. We are not asking you to be the hero of a rebuild, because the rebuild has already turned into something else. We are asking you to bring the last bit of edge that slashes hope into belief. We are asking you to take the noise that has swelled from cautious to lusty and tune it to the exact frequency of January. We are asking you to be the player the rest of the league has to plan around on Tuesday and dream about on Wednesday and pray against on Sunday. You can sell a lot of ideas in football, but nothing sells quite like timing, and timing is what makes a move like this vibrate. The Lions had drafted well, coached well, suffered skillfully, and learned from it, then won. But the thing about winning is that it changes the emphases in your sentences. It changes the parts of the roster you highlight in yellow when you read the depth chart at midnight and whisper to yourself about matchups you will not admit to anyone you already fear. You look at your secondary and see a chessboard that plays on 3 planes. You see the sum and subtract the space for a queen. Reporters in this rumor world chased a phantom flight number that seemed to blink from Tampa to Detroit and back to Tampa again in the tracking app's clumsy interface, a glitch that guaranteed maximal paranoia. Another thread believed the car service near the facility had been asked to stage an SUV at a strange hour, and it was the strangeness that mattered, because players keep routine the way watchmakers keep time. A suspicious smoothie order became the stuff of afternoon radio calls. When an athlete switches from mango pineapple to something that sounds like a Michigan orchard, apple, kale, ginger, something, they're either bored or bracing for a different winter. By evening, the rumor boomeranged into its inevitable metaphase. Was the fact that it existed proof that something had gone far enough to whisper? Surely no one invents a story like this out of blank air. Surely smoke has a source. Then, in the way gossip sometimes ascends to art, the most poetic detail of all surfaced. Supposedly, someone caught a glimpse of a new tablet wallpaper when Winfield set his device down during a meaningless team meeting. It was a photo of the Detroit skyline at dusk, the Ambassador Bridge like a string of pearls slung over the river. It was nothing, it was everything. If there was a single sentence that sealed the rumor's narrative arc, it was the one attributed to a veteran in Detroit's locker room, the kind who has played long enough to have both scars and synonyms for them. When a guy like that's available, the veteran supposedly said, "You don't wait on perfect. You make the moment perfect." The phrase spread because it slid into the gears people want to grind in the off-season. It spoke to urgency without panic, ambition without mutilating the plan. It suggested that the franchise had graduated from asking for respect to expecting it, and that the acquisition of a back-end mastermind was not a luxury, but an inevitability on the path they'd carved. The terms, the invented sources whispered, were assertive but sane. The guaranteed money was structured in a way that smiled at both sides. The length was neither a gamble on father time nor a one-year fling with an expensive reputation. The Lions would buy not only production but proximity to the ball, to the right decision, to the snap just before someone else moves, and to the snap just after everyone else reacts. They would buy the rare habit of turning no-win angles into waste shortcuts. They were, this rumor argued, purchasing the one thing that can't be taught: the ability to be calm in the breath between recognition and action. In that breath, most offenses live. In that breath, Antoine WINFIELD Jr. has built a career flicking out the light. Of course, there were skeptics. Skeptics were necessary. They asked whether the Buccaneers, proud and proven, would ever let the fulcrum of their past defense walk for anything short of a cosmic misalignment. They asked whether Detroit's room would tilt if one more star walked in and changed gravitational pull. They wondered if the chessboard would get crowded, if freedom would become friction, if one player asked to be everywhere might end up nowhere in the moments that count. They pointed out how the league bends to copycats and how a defense that hides intent must first be built on simple rules, and simple rules require trust built over time. Could a player as central as this be both plug-and-play and epic shifting? Could the new machine purr with the same rhythm as the old, or would it need months of stalls and sputters before the idol smoothed? In the rumor's grand narrative, the answer arrived with an invented scene as cinematic as it was preposterous. A snow-limbed morning in Allen Park. A team-branded beanie pulled down to the eyebrows, the exhale of breath visible in a plume that lingered like punctuation. A set of double doors whooshing open and then closing behind a figure who walked with purpose but not drama. Head up, hands free, body language broadcasting a simple fact. This was a decision, not a spectacle. He toured the hallway where photographs of old games leave you feeling the world used to be in black and white and just recently discovered color. He shook hands with people who were meeting him and also meeting the idea of him, because you never only greet the person, you greet the story they have already become in your head. In the fictional account, he visited the weight room and asked a short question about off-season sequencing that made two coaches grin because it was a question you only ask if you have read the program like a second language. He stepped into the empty indoor field, listened to the buildings hum, and with an athlete's perpetual restlessness, jogged 3 steps, broke down into a half-crouch, slid left, pitter-pattered his feet, then exploded to a spot as if reacting to a slant run by a ghost. That's when the text messages became exclamation points. That's when a positional coach's wife, in the mythology, sent a curt message that simply read, "It's happening," followed by a lion and a bolt. That's when the barista who usually pours black coffee for the scouting department winked at a paper cup and wrote a name with perhaps an extra flourish on the W. And because rumors crave objects, a photograph surfaced that wasn't a photograph at all but a mental Polaroid described by a player to a friend who told another friend who told a podcast. A moment in a conference room where a whiteboard read, "Blur Cover 3" and "Fire Zone" and "Mug Firm," with a small star drawn over the nickel spot and an arrow pointing toward it labeled AWJ Versatile. For the faithful, the star was a sacrament. For the doubtful, it was chalk dust brushed against a shoulder by a rumor written in the sky. The Buccaneers, in the fiction, did what proud teams do. They stayed dignified and said little. They closed ranks in a way that felt less like defensiveness and more like respect for a player whose effort had always been quiet and total. A coach might have said, if this were a true account, that football is a business, which is the blandest sentence in this sport and the truest, both at once. A teammate would have texted him a man-to-man note that was half congratulations, half warning, as all departures are. Be you, the message would say, because you're the trick nobody solves. But know that they'll try. They'll spend Wednesday on you and see if Thursday blinks. Before we move on, take a second to drop a like and subscribe. That way, you'll stay up to date with every exclusive Lions update, and you'll even have a chance to win an official Detroit Lions jersey. Let's keep going. As the rumor ballooned to fill every corner of the imaginary offseason, strategy talk took on a gleam. How would Detroit's front marry its thunder with his lightning? Would they tilt coverage to the boundary and choke the short field so that every shallow cross felt like running inside a shrinking room? Would they bait seam shots by showing split safeties and then trigger late to the throw, trusting Winfield to arrive with the exact balance of violence and legality the modern rulebook requires? Would they wreck screens before they formed and bludgeon bubbles until coordinators threw out half their Thursday install? Would the disguised creepers and simulated pressures that had been chalkboard curios suddenly become weekly staples, the way a song becomes a hit when the right voice sings it? The fictional analytics wing, in this gossip universe, printed out graphs that arced like hopeful rainbows, catch-all defensive composite metrics, run-stop over expectation, target EPA per bracketed receiver. It was nerd poetry, the kind that keeps the football romantics honest. The idea was not merely that he would pick passes or jab the ball free in that surgical way he has. It was that his presence tilts probabilities, and an ocean of tiny probabilities is what every game truly is. Football is a 40-second story told 100 times on a Sunday, and an elite safety changes the punctuation of the story's most important sentences. What had ended with commas now ended with periods, and what had ended with periods now got an exclamation mark, and what had ended with exclamation marks sometimes rewrote the next sentence entirely. In the dreamlike cadence of the rumor's next phase, a beat reporter announced, only to themselves, in their notebook, that it would all come down to a press conference that hadn't been scheduled yet. They practiced in their head the questions they'd ask about fit, about leadership, about the tension between freelancing and system fidelity. They prepared to parse every clause. What does multiple mean when a coach says it? What does green dog mean when it escapes a linebacker's coach's mouth and flutters into a paragraph? What does we love our guys mean when a general manager follows it up with a look that says, and we might love them more if they had this one more guy among them? The imagined room would smell like marker ink and carpet cleaner, and a bank of cameras would exhale. A jersey would be lifted for photographs, and the numbers would sit still as if they had not vibrated for hours at the thought of being near the person whose name curved above them. But the story made itself more interesting by refusing to arrive at the ceremony. It lingered in the prelude, where possibilities feel warmer than facts. A rumor world thrives on this. One more detail floated in. The paramedics had been called to aid a fan who had convinced themselves that abandon meant betrayal rather than evolution and had, in their fervor, forgotten to eat lunch. Another fan in Tampa sent a long, achingly respectful thank you note addressed to nobody in particular, listing plays in bullet points that weren't bullets because the author didn't believe in puncturing the moment. A Detroit season ticket holder pulled down a cardboard box from a closet, slipped a jersey over their head as if to see whether it still fit, and whispered one more piece into the empty room. Somewhere a cornerback's coach inhaled a French fry, laughed at a meme that placed Winfield in a Honolulu blue cartoon with an oversized helmet, then stopped laughing when the meme made more schematic sense than it should have. In every league, in every era, the big rumor reveals as much about the people telling it as it does about the subject. The Tampa voices, in this imaginary telling, protected what they'd built by rightly refusing to panic. They enumerated the talent that remained, the coaching acumen that doesn't wither when a nameplate is pried loose, the organization that has resolved harder riddles. The Detroit voices lifted chin and chest and spoke of layers, of rotations that would feel like trapdoors beneath a quarterback's feet, of January weather and the sound of a stadium declaring itself in a single vowel, go. The neutral observers, pretending at objectivity while indulging the thrill of speculation, talked about how a secondary like this makes time itself elastic. You either speed up the quarterback's heartbeat or you slow down the receiver's routes, and either way you are playing with someone else's clock. And then the rumor, like all great off-season epics, wrote its own epilogue in a stray line that could have meant everything or nothing. A young fan wearing a homemade shirt scrawled with marker ink that bled through to the skin was said to have shouted across a parking lot when a tinted window SUV slid past, "See you in blue." The SUV didn't slow down. The window didn't roll. None of that mattered. The point of rumors is not to be answered by the subject, but to be answered by the city, and the city, in this yarn, answered with energy that pulsed like a defensive back's feet at the line of scrimmage. Quick, rhythmic, poised, eager to strike. If the move were to happen, if this ridiculous, delicious swirl were to harden into a fact, there would be football reasons that fit on a chalkboard and life reasons that don't. There would be hours of film room dialogue about leverage and disguise and route stems, about stack releases and banjo calls, and the exact angle of a safety's first two steps when disguising quarters as three. There would be quiet kitchen table moments about winter coats and commutes, about the difference between a Gulf breeze and a lake wind, about grandparents who can drive 2 hours instead of flying for 3 and waiting for 1. There would be team text threads that pop off and then return to steady hum, jokes about cuisine that teaches you to love a different kind of comfort food, emojis that compress whole paragraphs of gratitude and curiosity into a line of iconography. But since this is, emphatically, a rumor told for the joy of the telling, it stays just here, balanced on the edge where a false thing can teach a true lesson. The lesson is not about which franchise wins a transaction, or which city loves harder, or which front office pushes their chips more bravely toward the center. The lesson is about how, every so often, a player emerges who can collapse distance between scheme and execution, between risk and reward, between concept and completion. When a player like that walks out a side door into the humid night with a cap pulled low, every whispered syllable becomes a drumbeat, and every drumbeat reveals what a fan base believes about itself. Tampa believes in their resilience. Detroit believes in their ascent. Everyone believes, whether they admit it or not, in the power of a safety who can see the play before it declares its intentions and arrive there, as if the grass remembered his footsteps from last time. And so the rumor exhales and rests, like a defense in the huddle listening for the next call. It sits contained in the hush before the ball is spotted, where breath condenses in front of face masks and eyes narrow to slits and cleats grip the earth for a first step that means everything. The words will keep buzzing, because that is their nature. A pen will stay uncapped on a desk in Allen Park. A pen will stay uncapped on a desk in Tampa. Someone will open a door with a slow hinge. Someone will count to 3. Helmets will tilt. A coach will stare into the right now and imagine the afterward. And in that strange, elastic moment, the story will keep telling itself. Antoine WINFIELD Jr. walks away. Antoine WINFIELD Jr. walks in. Antoine WINFIELD Jr. signs a page that does or does not exist. A city shouts, another nods, and football. This beautiful, breathless theater of inches and instincts waits for the whistle that makes truth out of rumor or rumor out of truth. We bring you the latest Lions news every single day. So make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. And of course, drop a comment below with your thoughts on today's news. Your voice makes a difference for Lions Nation. See you in the next video.